What would you do if every person in your village had passed the same man on the same road for 3 days running, and not one of them had stopped, and you, the one with the least to give, were the only one who did? And what would you do when the stopping turned out to matter in a way you could not have calculated, because the man on the road was not the man on the road at all? This is the story of Edith Plum, 19 years old, the keeper of a bakehouse that was barely keeping her, and the woodcutter who was not a woodcutter, and the cup of water that was only a cup of water, and also, in the way of small things that land in the right moment, everything. Settle in. Let us travel back to the Shropshire Hills in the summer of 1869, to a story about what it costs to be kind when kindness is not cheap, and what it is worth when it arrives at the right gate. Stay close, and let us know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. The village of Harrow sat in a crease of the Shropshire Hills the way a letter sits in an envelope, tucked in, contained, aware of its own smallness. It had a church with a leaning spire, a mill that still worked, an inn that mostly worked, and a high street of perhaps 14 establishments, of which the most useful, in Edith Plum's considered opinion, was the bakehouse, because she ran it, and because bread was the one thing a village could not persuade itself it did not need. She had inherited it from her father, who had inherited it from his, in the plain and unromantic way of trades that pass through families not because they are loved, but because they are there, and someone has to do them, and no one else has offered. Her father had died in the spring of her 18th year, suddenly, of the heart, leaving her the bakehouse, the cottage behind it, the oven that required stoking at 4 in the morning, and a debt to the miller, whose name was Croft, and whose patience was not inexhaustible. She was not alone, precisely. There was Nan, who was 60 and had worked the bakehouse since Edith's grandfather's time, and who made up in sturdiness what she lacked in flexibility, and who said whatever she thought about everything, which was useful and sometimes alarming. There was the oven, which was a presence in the life of the bakehouse, as real as any person, requiring its own tending and having its own moods. And there was the village, which consumed the bread and paid for it on a sliding scale of promptness that corresponded, roughly, with each person's opinion of whether Edith was managing adequately. The general verdict, delivered in the sideways manner of Shropshire villages, was that she was managing, but only just, and that the situation was a shame, and that someone ought to do something, and that someone was not, specifically, any of them. Edith had no opinion about this. She had no time for opinions that were not practical. She rose at 4, stoked the oven, mixed and proved and baked, opened the bakehouse at 7, sold bread until it was gone or the morning ended, whichever came first, closed up, kept the accounts, made the orders, went to bed, and rose at 4 again. This was her life, and she did not call it a hard life, because it did not occur to her to call it anything. It was the life that was there, and she was in it, and that was the whole of the accounting. The summer of 1869 was a dry one, which was good for the harvest and hard on everything else. The hills turned from their green to a tawny gold by July. The streams dropped in their beds, and the track that ran through Harrow on its way between the Stretton Valley and the market town of Ludlow became a thing of pale dust that coated everything within 20 feet of it from July to September. It was on this track that the woodcutter appeared. Edith first noticed him on a Tuesday, which was her day for the early delivery to the farms on the upper lane. She had the cart loaded before 6, Nan holding the horse while Edith climbed up, and as they moved out of the yard she saw him on the track. He was coming from the Ludlow direction, which meant he had been walking since at least the night before to arrive at this hour. He carried an axe over one shoulder, which was how she named him in her mind, the woodcutter. It was a heavy axe, a felling axe, its head wrapped in sacking. His coat was dark with sweat and dust, and he moved with the laboring walk of a man who has been at it too long and knows he has further to go. He was not young, somewhere between 40 and 50, she thought, with the lean, weathered look of a man who worked outdoors. His hands, as he passed the bakehouse cart, she saw briefly before looking back at the road. Large, calloused hands, the hands of a man who used them. She thought nothing particular about him. The road brought all kinds. She drove on. She saw him again on Wednesday. He was coming back the other way now, toward Ludlow, and he had the same coat and the same axe and the same laboring walk. But he was also carrying something across his shoulders, a bundle of cut branches, which told her the woodcutting had been done, and the result was being carried to wherever it needed to go. The day was already hot. It was not yet 8 in the morning, and the heat was the flat, pressing heat of a summer that has decided to be serious about itself. He was passing the bakehouse when she came out with the first tray. She saw him look at the pump in the bakehouse yard, the way a thirsty person looks at water, with the particular expression of someone calculating whether the asking is worth the cost of the asking. She registered this. She had the tray in her hands. Nan was calling something from inside. She went in. On Thursday she saw him a third time, and this time she had been expecting him. He was on the track again, direction of Ludlow again, a different bundle across his shoulders, the same coat, the same dust. It was 7:30 in the morning, and the heat had arrived early, and she had been watching the track from the bakehouse window since 7, with the specific attention of someone who has decided to do something and is waiting for the occasion. She came out with a cup of water. She did not have a plan beyond the cup. She did not have a speech or an expectation. She had a cup of water and the observation that a man had been looking at her pump for 2 days and she had not acted on it, and the not acting had sat with her overnight in a way that suggested her conscience was keeping accounts. She crossed the yard and went to the gate and held out the cup. "The day is hot," she said, "and you have been on this road since yesterday." He stopped. He looked at the cup and then at her, with the specific attention of a man assessing something he has not quite expected. He was, she saw now, not only weathered, but tired. Not the tiredness of one long day, but of accumulated days, of a person who had been spending more than they were taking in for some time, and had arrived at a deficit that the body was beginning to announce. He took the cup. He drank it in one long, careful motion, without waste. "Thank you," he said. His voice was not the voice she had expected. She could not have said precisely what voice she had expected, but it was not this one, which was quiet and even, and educated in a way that the coat and the axe and the dust did not prepare for. She noted this, and filed it without comment. "The pump is in the yard," she said, "if you want more." He looked at the pump. He looked at her. There was a moment in which she could feel him deciding something. "I won't impose," he said. "It is a pump," she said, "not a sitting room. You would not be imposing on anything except the water, which is not mine to be imposed upon." She opened the gate. "Come in." He came in. He filled the cup himself at the pump and drank a second cup and then a third, and she went back to the bakehouse, because bread did not wait, and left him to it. When she came out again with the second tray, he was still in the yard. He was not at the pump anymore. He was looking at the oven wall, the exterior of it, where the mortar had cracked between the stones over the winter, and she had not yet had the funds or the opportunity to point it. "Your oven is losing heat," he said. "I know it," she said. "Through the south wall, there," he indicated the cracking. "You will see it in the bake, an uneven crust on the south-facing side of each loaf." She stopped. She looked at him. "Yes," she said slowly, "I have been seeing it. The mortar is a simple repair, if you have the lime, an afternoon's work." "I know the repair," she said. "I have not had the afternoon." He looked at the wall for a moment longer, with the specific focus of a man reading something. Then he looked at her. "I have time," he said, "if you have the lime." She studied him. He was a stranger on the road, with an axe, and a good voice, and sweat-dark shoulders. He was also a man who had just identified a problem with her oven that she had been managing around for 2 months, and who proposed to fix it. She said, "I have the lime. Then I will fix your wall," he said, in exchange for the water and whatever else needs doing in a yard that has been managed by one person for too long. She looked at the yard. She knew what was in it: the pump that dripped at the washer, the gate hinge that lifted instead of swinging, the broken spoke in the cartwheel that she had been meaning to have looked at, the missing cobbles in the south corner where rain pooled and the horse did not like to stand. She said, "That is too much for a cup of water." "The cup of water was yours to give or not give," he said. "The rest is mine to offer or not offer. They are different transactions." He said it with the same quiet evenness, the same precise construction, and she looked at him steadily for a moment, and then said, "There is bread, if you are hungry, and the lime is in the shed." His name was given as Thomas. He did not offer a surname, and she did not ask, because a man offering a day's work on the strength of a cup of water was not a man obligated to give his history along with it, and she had enough experience of the road to know that asking for more than was offered was the surest way to end what had been offered. He worked without supervision and without instruction, which she noted. A man who needed to be told everything cost more attention than she had to spare. He went to the oven wall first, because he had said he would, and he was the kind of man who did things in the order he said he would do them. He mixed the lime carefully, in the right proportions, adding the water himself at the pump in small amounts until he had a mortar of the correct consistency. She watched him do this from the bakehouse window in the intervals between duties, and she noted that he knew what the right consistency was, which meant he had pointed mortar before, which meant the axe was not the whole of his practical knowledge. He finished the wall in 2 hours. He swept the yard. He looked at the gate hinge, produced from the sacking around the axe head a small kit of tools she had not seen, and corrected the hinge in 20 minutes, the gate swinging true and easy for the first time since she could remember. He looked at the cart wheel spoke and reported that it needed a new spoke and not merely a repair, and that he could replace it if she had the timber, which she had, in the shed, a length of ash her father had bought and never used. He replaced it. He looked at the missing cobbles and did not ask her if she wanted them replaced, but simply went and found the cobbles, which were in the corner of the yard where they had been swept out of the gap and left, and set them back in with a rammer and fine sand from the same shed, and they fitted level and true. He stopped at midday. She brought out bread and cheese and cold tea to the yard, because a man who had worked as he had worked, and had been given a cup of water as his starting wage, was owed more than the cup, and because he had now done more for her bakehouse in 1 morning than 3 months of careful management had accomplished. He ate at the yard table without ceremony. He did not talk while he ate, which she respected, because she did not talk while she worked, and felt no obligation to perform sociability while she ate. When he had finished, he said, "The pump washer wants changing." "I know," she said. "I have a new washer. I do not have the wrench for the fitting." He looked at her. "What kind of wrench?" She described it. He reached into the toolkit and produced the wrench. He looked at her with something that was not quite a smile. "The pump," she said, with a dryness that she heard in her own voice and did not bother to correct. He changed the pump washer. The drip stopped. The pump moved freely. She tested it twice, and the second time she made a sound she had not planned to make, a sound of satisfaction so complete and private she was briefly embarrassed. "How long has it been dripping?" he asked. "Since February," she said. He said nothing to this, but something crossed his face that she catalogued and did not interrogate. In the afternoon he looked at the cart axle, which she had not mentioned, and told her it wanted greasing, and did it. He looked at the bakehouse chimney from the yard, and told her the cowl was seated incorrectly, and that she was losing draw, which explained the slow-starting mornings she had been blaming on the wood, and seated it correctly, with a length of her father's ash and a piece of wire. He showed her how he had seated it so she could do it again herself. She watched him explain this, at the end of the afternoon, with the light going golden over the Shropshire hills, and she said, without quite planning to say it, "You are not a woodcutter." He looked at her. "You cut wood," she said. "I do not doubt that. But a woodcutter's knowledge ends at wood." She held his gaze. "You know mortar. You know hinges, pump fittings, axle grease, chimney cowls. You know them the way a man knows things he has been responsible for over a long time, not things he has learned in a trade." He was quiet for a moment. "A woodcutter," she said, "does not speak as you speak, and does not look at a broken oven wall as you looked at it, the way a man looks at something he is accountable for." The light was long on the yard. The horse stamped once in its stable. Somewhere in the village, someone was ringing a bell for supper. "No," he said, and said it the way she had learned he said things he had decided to commit to, plainly and without inflation. "I am not a woodcutter." "Then what are you?" He looked at the bakehouse, and the repaired wall, and the true gate, and the yard that was now, unmistakably, in better order than it had been that morning. He looked at it with an expression she had not seen on him before, something personal in it. "I am trying to understand something," he said, and the road seemed the right place to try. She waited. "I am—" He stopped. Started again with the care of a man choosing the architecture of a sentence. "I have been away from this part of the country for some time, a long time. I returned in the spring and found that the things I had left in other hands had not been kept as they should have been, and I did not." He paused. "I did not know whether the failure was in the keeping or in the handing, whether I had left things in wrong hands, or whether I had not given the right instruction, or whether the place itself had become something I no longer understood." He turned and looked at her directly. "So I walked it." She let this settle. "The estate," she said. He looked at her. "You are walking your own estate," she said, "to see how it is." She did not make it a question, because it was not a question. It was the fact. The coat, the axe used to make the cover plausible, the knowledge that ran too deep for a laborer and too practical for a gentleman of the kind that did not work. The way he looked at walls and fittings and hinges, not with curiosity, but with assessment. The particular expression of a man who is accountable for something and is taking its measure. "The estate," he said, "and the village, and the people in the village, and what they need, and what they have not been given, and whether they know who has failed to give it." A pause. "Your pump washer has been wrong since February." "Yes. The estate carpenter is responsible for the maintenance of the village pumps, under the tenancy terms." She looked at him. "He has not been doing it," he said. "He has not been doing a number of things. And I have been walking for 3 days, and I have seen a cracked bridge parapet at the mill lane, and a drainage ditch on the upper farms that is blocked and flooding the low field, and a bakehouse with a faulty oven wall, and a dripping pump, and a cartwheel that had been running on a failing spoke for." He looked at her. "How long?" "Since April," she said. He closed his eyes briefly. "Since April." He opened them. "And the carpenter has not." "He has not been to the village in 2 months," she said. "He sent his boy in May with a message that he was ill. He has not sent word since." Something in the steadiness of his face shifted, the specific shift of a man receiving information he had suspected and is now confirming. He looked at the yard again. "I should tell you," he said, "who I am." "I have a reasonable conjecture," she said. He looked at her, with the attention she had come to recognize as his specific version of being surprised. "The estate that covers Harrow Fold," she said, "is the Ashfield estate. The Duke of Ashfield came back to Shropshire in April and has not been seen in the village since his arrival, which is not, by itself, unusual, because the Duke of Ashfield has not been seen in Harrow fold in 12 years, and a man who has not visited in 12 years does not suddenly become visible in the first month. She held his gaze. His name, as I understand it, is William Holt. He is 43 years old and was at the estate for the death of his father 2 years ago, and left again for reasons that are generally summarized in the village as complicated. He was very still. I did not know your face, she said. I have never seen you before. But I know the estate because I rent from it, and I know the carpenter is Croft's cousin, which is why Croft has not complained about him, and I know the bridge parapet at the mill lane has been reported to the estate twice in writing since March, and I know the drainage ditch on the upper farm has been a problem for 6 years. She paused. I know these things because a bakehouse is where people talk, and people talk to me because I am there before 7, and the talking is incidental to the bread, and incidental conversation is the most honest kind. The evening had come down fully over the yard. The light was amber and low, and the Shropshire hills had gone to their long summer silhouette, and William Holt, Duke of Ashfield, stood in the yard of a village bakehouse that his estate was responsible for and had failed, and looked at the woman who had given him a cup of water because his need was visible and her conscience kept accounts. You knew, he said. Not for certain, she said, but the knowing was available if I looked for it, and I had been looking since the oven wall. A woodcutter does not fix an oven wall and then move to the pump and then the hinge and then the axle, as though working through a list he already had in his head. She tilted her head slightly. You did have a list. I did, he said. I had been keeping it since Monday. She looked at the repaired wall, the steady gate, the pump that no longer dripped. Then you have fixed part of your own list, she said, which is one way to approach an accounting. He said, Miss Plum. He used her name for the first time, and she felt the strangeness of it, the fact that he had known her name and she had not known his face, and what that asymmetry said about the distance between a landlord and a tenant that should not, in a healthy estate, have been as wide as it was. I owe this village more than a repaired wall. You owe this village a carpenter who does his job, she said, and a bridge parapet, and a drainage ditch, and someone in that great house who knows what is in it and what is not. She looked at him steadily. You also owe Croft money, because his cousin has been drawing an estate wage for work not done, and the cost of it has landed, at the far end of the line, on the people least able to carry it, which includes the bakehouse. A silence, a long one, the kind that has weight in it. I know, he said. He said it with the specific quality of a man who has spent 3 days making himself know things he had been at a comfortable distance from, and who finds the knowing necessary and uncomfortable in equal measure. That is why I walked it. I needed to know what I was responsible for and could no longer estimate it at the length of a desk. And now you know, she said. Now I know considerably more than I did on Monday, he said. Including, he paused, including that the village has been managing without the estate's proper function for longer than I had allowed myself to understand, and that the managing has been done, in very large part, by the people who had the least cushion for it. He looked at her again in the particular, steady way of a man who is trying to see something clearly and has decided not to stop until he has. You gave me a cup of water, he said, when no one else on this road has stopped for 3 days. That is not, let me say it, he said, not commanding, asking. I walked this road for 3 days with an axe and a laborer's coat, and I was looked through by 11 people I passed, 2 of whom I recognized as tenants of this estate, and not one of them stopped. He was quiet for a moment. I was not stopping to test anyone. I want you to know that. I was walking to understand the land, and the distance came out of the walking, and the not stopping came out of the distance, and I observed it without intending to. He paused. But I observed it. Edith was quiet for a moment. They were busy, she said. Not to defend them, she knew that was not what she was doing, but because it was the truth, and she did not deal in partial truths. It is summer. The farms are full of summer work, and the road is full of summer traffic, and a man with an axe on a busy road in July is unremarkable. You were busy, he said. I had the tray in my hands, she said. Twice. I had the tray in my hands, and I went in instead. The third day I had a clear look, and I came out. She met his eyes. I am not telling you that story to make myself look better in it. I am telling you that the cup of water was a small thing and I was slow to it. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen in the 3 days of his presence in her yard, an expression beyond the assessment and the attention and the working list, something that had been compressed under the working of the day and had now, in the evening, found room. It was not small, he said. At the time, it was not small at all. She was quiet. The horse moved in the stable. Nan, who had been in the bakehouse since mid-afternoon and whom Edith had been aware of as a presence in the background, performing the elaborate incuriosity of a woman who is absolutely paying attention, could be heard putting away the evening implements. The rent, he said. On this bakehouse, has it been reviewed in the last 5 years? It has not been reviewed in 12 years, she said, which corresponds, I think, to when the estate's attention last came this way. He said nothing for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was the same, level and plain, but there was something different underneath it, the particular quality of a man making a commitment in the hearing of a witness. I will be at the estate by tomorrow evening, he said. I will have the carpenter's situation addressed within the week. The bridge will be repaired before the autumn. The drainage ditch will be looked at by my own surveyor before the end of July. He paused. The rent on this bakehouse will be reviewed downward. I do not know yet by how much. I will know when I have seen the accounts. You don't have to. I am not doing it for the cup of water, he said, and there was something precise and firm in the saying of it. I am doing it because the rent on this bakehouse reflects a level of estate function that has not been delivered, and a rent is not a gift, it is an exchange, and an exchange that is not honored on both sides is not a rent. It is a taking. She looked at him for a long moment. All right, she said. All right, he agreed. Nan appeared in the bakehouse doorway with the expression of a woman who has been invisible for 2 hours and is now choosing to become visible. She looked at the stranger in the yard, at the repaired wall, at the true gate, at the stopped pump, at Edith's face, and then back at the stranger. There is supper, she said to Edith. She looked at the man. There is enough for 3. He looked at Edith. She looked at Nan. There was a conversation between them that required no words, as conversations between people who have worked together for 20 years sometimes do not. Wash your hands at the pump, Edith said to him. The table is in the kitchen. He washed his hands at the pump. He came to the table. The supper was simple, as bakehouse suppers are, bread and potatoes and a piece of cold mutton, and the last of the day's bake set out in a cloth. And he ate it the way he had eaten the midday bread, with the attention of someone for whom the food is genuinely welcome and the company genuinely valued. Nan talked, because Nan always talked at the table, the way water always finds its way downhill. She talked about the village and the summer and the state of the upper farms and the Miller Croft's unpopular habit of weighing in the customer's disfavor, and she did not ask the man a single question, which was both her courtesy and her particular form of interrogation, because a person who is not asked questions reveals more in the answers they choose to give unprompted. He listened. He asked one question about the mill, which was specific, and about the weir, and Nan answered it, and looked at him, and then at Edith, with an expression that Edith recognized but did not acknowledge. After supper, he rose and thanked them both, with a formality that sat oddly above the coat and the yard work, and perfectly in accord with the voice, and Nan said he was welcome, and Edith walked him to the gate. At the gate he turned. "I will send someone," he said, "to confirm the arrangements. Within the fortnight. I will be here," she said. "Yes," he said. He looked at the gate, swinging true on its repaired hinge, and something moved across his face in the evening light. Not quite a smile, but the considered ancestor of one. "You keep a good yard," he said, "for a bakehouse that has been managing alone." "The yard was better today than yesterday," she said. "That was your work." "The mortar was your lime," he said, "and your eye told you the wall needed it before I arrived." She looked at him, and he looked back, and in the last of the evening light on the Shropshire hills, he was neither the woodcutter he had arrived as, nor, quite, the duke she now knew him to be, but something between those two things. The man in the coat, who had drunk 3 cups of water at her pump, and fixed her gate, and eaten her bread at her table, and kept an honest account of what was owed and what was not. "Good night," she said. "Good night, Miss Plum," he said. He walked out through the gate and up the track, and the summer evening received him, and she stood at the gate until she could not see him on the road any more, and then she went in. Nan was washing the dishes. "Well," Nan said, with the particular compression of a woman who has been not saying something for 3 hours and is now saying it in 1 syllable. "Wash the dishes," Edith said. "I am washing the dishes," Nan said. "I am also noting that the Duke of Ashfield just ate cold mutton at our table." "He did," Edith said. "And that you knew who he was for the better part of the afternoon, and did not say so." "He was working," she said. It seemed unnecessary to interrupt the working. Nan set a plate on the rack. "You are a very particular person," she said. "I know it," Edith said. "Go to bed, Nan. The 4 o'clock comes regardless." The fortnight he had promised became 10 days. The person sent was a land agent, a brisk, competent young man named Hollis, who arrived with a ledger and the specific energy of someone who has been given a clear commission and is anxious to execute it before anything changes. He confirmed the rent review. He confirmed the carpenter's replacement. He presented a written schedule for the bridge repair and the drainage survey, with dates and responsible parties named. He also presented, at the end of his list, a letter. It was not a long letter. It was written in a hand that she recognized from the estate documents she had seen in the past, the hand of a man who wrote as he spoke, plainly and without surplus. It said, "Miss Plum, the carpenter's situation has been resolved. His replacement, a man named Tabor from the Stretton Valley, will call on the village within the week to assess outstanding maintenance. I have reviewed the Harrow Fold tenancy accounts. The rent adjustment will reflect, as I said it would, the years of estate function not delivered. Hollis has the figures. The bridge and the drainage are in hand. I write this because I also said, at your gate, that someone would be sent to confirm the arrangements, and I have sent Hollis for that purpose. But the arrangements are mine, and I wished you to hear them in my words, and not only through a ledger. I do not know if you will be told this by anyone else, so I will tell it plainly. The 3 days on the road were the most useful 3 days I have spent since I came back to Shropshire. What I learned on the road could not have been learned any other way. I knew this before I started, which is why I started. But knowing it before and finding it true are different things. I found Harrow Fold in worse condition than I had allowed myself to know, and in better condition than it deserved to be, because the people in it have been carrying the estate's failures on their own backs without complaint or credit. I will not allow it to continue. That is a promise made to myself, which is the kind that is hardest to break and easiest to hide when broken. I am writing it to you because you are the person most likely to know if I have broken it. The pump is good now. I hope the bake is more even. W.H. Edith read the letter twice. She folded it. She put it on her father's desk, where she kept the accounts and the correspondence and the things that required keeping. She went back to the bakehouse. But she read it a third time, that evening, at the kitchen table, in the light of the single lamp. Tabor the carpenter came on Thursday, and was everything Croft's cousin had not been: capable, prompt, and possessed of a list of his own that he produced before she could present hers. He worked through the week. He repaired the pump housing at the mill. He replaced the broken stile at the upper farm. He attended to a dozen things across the village that had been accumulating in the silent ledger of deferred maintenance, and he did them correctly and in the time he said he would, and the village took note, as villages take note of change, with the cautious, watchful approval of people who have been disappointed before and are reserving full judgment until the evidence is complete. The bridge repair began in August. The drainage survey found, as Edith had told William Holt it would find, a blockage that had been there for 6 years, and that was remediable in a morning once someone arrived with the intent to remedy it. The morning arrived, and the intent and the remedy, and the lower field of the upper farm drained, as it had not drained since Edith was a girl, and the tenant, a man called Sayer, who had been farming the waterlogged ground, with the resigned stoicism of a man fighting a tide, came into the bakehouse on the day of the repair, with a face that she had never seen on him before, and that took her a moment to identify as simple relief. She gave him a loaf. He took it without protest, which told her everything about how long it had been. She wrote a brief letter to the estate. The drainage on the Sayer farm has been repaired. The effect is visible. Mr. Sayer's situation will improve considerably from the autumn planting. The bridge is solid. Tabor is good. The bake is more even. EP. The reply came within the week. Miss Plum. I am glad the drainage is remedied. Sayer's tenancy was examined and his rent adjusted accordingly. I should have done it 2 years ago when the reports first came in. Tabor comes with good recommendation, and I am finding the recommendation correct. I intend to visit Harrow Fold in September, not on foot and not in a laborer's coat. I should have done that too, and sooner. W.H. She put this letter with the first one on her father's desk, weighted down with the small brass inkwell that had been his. He came in September. He came as he had said he would come, in a way that declared itself a good horse and a good coat, and the land agent Hollis beside him, and a manner that was the same and not the same as the man who had stood at her pump in July, the same voice, the same directness, the same working attention, but now with the weight of the coat behind it, which was not a trivial weight, and which he appeared to be carrying with full knowledge of what it implied. He called on the mill, and the upper farms, and the inn, and made himself visible and answerable in the way that 12 years of absence had not permitted, and the village watched, and noted, and reserved its verdict, as it does. He came to the bakehouse at mid-morning. She was at the counter. Nan was in the back. 2 customers were completing their purchases as he arrived, and he waited, which she noted. A man who is genuinely there to do business waits, and a man who is there to demonstrate his importance does not. When the customers had gone, he came to the counter. The wall has held, he said. It has, she said. The mortar is good. The lime was good, he said. She looked at him across the counter, and he looked back, and the September morning light came through the bakehouse window in the long, clear way of autumn, and the bread was cooling on the racks behind her, and the yard outside was in good order, and the pump moved freely, and the gate swung true. The village has noticed, she said, Tabor and the bridge and the drainage. They have not said so in those words, because this is Harrow Fold, and they do not say things in those words, but the noticing is there. I know, he said. I spent the morning receiving it, one careful silence at a time. She almost smiled. That is how it goes, here. I am learning that. He looked at the rack behind her. I would like to buy a loaf. She raised an eyebrow. You have ridden from Ashfield for a loaf. I have ridden from Ashfield to do what I said I would do, which was to visit Harrow properly, and I am doing it, he said. I would also like to buy a loaf, because the last bread I had in this bakehouse was very good, and I have been thinking about it since July. She took a loaf from the rack and put it on the counter and named the price. He paid it, the exact price, without negotiation or largesse, and she noted that too. A man who pays the price is a different man from one who overpays to signal benevolence. He took the loaf. He looked at her. I will come again in October, he said. I intend to come regularly, because the estate should have been visited regularly, and was not, and I am attempting to correct the habit of distance. He paused. I also intend to come, because the conversations in this bakehouse are more informative than any report I have received from any agent in the last 2 years, and I have been negligent in not seeking them before. You are welcome, she said, for the information and for the bread. Thank you, he said, and there was something in the saying of it that reached beyond the bread and the information, back to the yard in July, to the cup at the gate, to the beginning of it. She held his look for a moment. You fixed my oven wall, she said, and the pump and the hinge and the axle and the cobbles. I think we are approximately even. Something crossed his face that she had been watching for since July, the thing that had been suppressed by the task and the list and the working of each day in turn, a thing that was warm and direct and personal. I don't think we are, he said, but I would like to see if we get there. He walked out through the gate. She stood at the counter and watched him go, through the bakehouse window, the good coat and the good horse, and the road that she had been watching for 3 days, in July, without quite knowing why. Nan appeared at the kitchen door. Well, she said, in the same syllable she had used in July. The loaves need turning, Edith said. They have been turned, Nan said. I turned them while you were at the counter, not smiling at the Duke. She looked at her employer of 20 years with the specific expression of a woman who has been waiting for a particular thing to happen and has just seen the first evidence of its approach. He is going to come in October. He said so. And November, I should think, Nan said. And December. Edith went to the racks and examined the loaves that did not require examining. The 4 o'clock comes regardless, she said. It does, Nan agreed. But so does October. October came. He came with it. He came and stayed 2 days at the Harrow Inn, which surprised the innkeeper and gratified him deeply, and he walked the village, and he sat in the bakehouse with a cup of tea that Edith had not offered, but that Nan had produced without being asked, and they talked, not about the estate, or not only about the estate, about the village and the season and the book she was reading, which he had read, and about which he had an opinion she disagreed with, and about which she told him she disagreed, and he told her why she was wrong, and she told him why he was wrong, and Nan sat in the back and made sounds of emphatic agreement with whichever of them was currently speaking, in the impartial way of an audience enjoying the performance. November came. He came with it. December came, cold and early, the hills drawing on their gray winter coat, the valley running between dark hedgerows, the bakehouse warm with the 4 o'clock fire, and the smell of bread, that was the smell of every morning of her life. He came to the bakehouse on a Tuesday in December, earlier than he had come before the day was properly light, and the reason, she understood when she saw his face, was not the bread. He stood at the counter and said, I have been thinking since July about how to say this without it being wrong. She put down the cloth she was holding. I have not managed to find the version that is not wrong, or at least not awkward, he said, and I have decided that the awkwardness is mine to carry, and that waiting for a better version is its own kind of cowardice. He looked at her directly. I would like your permission to call on you, not as the estate calling on the bakehouse, as myself calling on you. He paused. I am aware of the difference in our situations, and I am aware that this is not nothing, and I am not asking you to be unaware of it. I am asking whether, with that full awareness, you would find the calling welcome. The bakehouse was very quiet. The fire breathed. The bread on the racks cooled in its slow, patient way. Edith thought about July, about the cup at the gate and the 3 days she had watched before she gave it, and the awkwardness of the first cup and the ease of the third, and how the difference between those 2 cups was nothing except the small, courageous decision to cross the yard. "You fixed my oven wall," she said. He waited. "And my pump, and my gate, and my axle, and my cobbles." She looked at him. "And then you sent a carpenter who did his job, and you repaired the bridge, and you drained the Sayer farm, and you have been coming every month since September, and staying 2 days, and buying a loaf at the correct price, and arguing about books." She tilted her head. "What is the calling on me that is separate from all of that?" He stood at the counter for a moment. "Nothing," he said. "There is nothing separate. That is—" He stopped. "That is what I have been trying to say since July, that what is already here is the thing I am asking to continue, and I did not know how to ask for the continuation without making it sound less than what it is." He looked at her steadily. "It is not less than what it is." She was quiet for a moment. Nan was in the back, behind the partition, performing the most elaborate, invisible presence of her career. "I know," Edith said. "I have known what it was since October. I have been waiting for you to work up to it." He looked at her. "Come in October, you said," she told him. "And I will be here, you said." And I was here. She looked at the counter between them, the plain wood of it, the dusting of flour on its surface, that was always there, no matter how often she wiped it. "I have been here." He exhaled. It was a small sound, barely audible, and she recognized it for what it was, the release of a thing held too carefully for too long. "Then I will call on you," he said. "You will," she agreed. The December morning was still and cold, and the Shropshire hills were invisible in the low clouds, and the bakehouse was warm, and Nan in the back dropped something deliberately and said something under her breath, and then made the sound of a woman occupying herself with something entirely different, which she was not. Edith picked up the cloth. "The morning loaves want watching," she said. "Stay and watch them with me if you like." He stayed. He stayed that morning and came back in January, and the calling was what it had always been, and also something more, and the something more was not loud or sudden, but arrived the way mornings arrive in winter, by degrees and then all at once, until one day in February Edith Plum stood in her yard in the thin, early light and looked at the gate that swung true, and the pump that did not drip, and the wall whose mortar had held through a Shropshire winter, and understood that the thing she had been managing alone was no longer entirely alone, and that this had happened through the simple arithmetic of a cup of water given when it cost something to give it. She had not given it to receive anything back. That was important, and it was true. She had given it because a man was thirsty, and the pump was there, and the withholding would have sat with her through the night. What came back was not payment. It was not the balancing of an account. It was what happens when two people are honest with each other in the small transactions of daily life, and the honesty accumulates, and the accumulation turns out to be the shape of something worth having. The oven wall held. The bread was even. The gate swung true. Some debts are made of money, and some are made of lime and water, and a cup given at the right moment, and both kinds want paying, and the paying of the second kind is almost never straightforward and almost always worth it. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who might need to hear that small kindnesses are not small, and tell us in the comments what it made you think of. Until next time, take care.